Norwegians gave the Peace Prize to Machado, and I already see that Fox News has announced that she is the logical successor now after Maduro's fall. This is how they frame it. But of course, all of this is this was to a large extent the purpose, I think, of giving the prize. That is to give the illegitimacy for the invasion, given that she has been a supporter of it. But it also, of course, was complemented by other justifications. We heard about narco-terrorism. We're told that Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Russia, China, all of these actors are operating in Venezuela, whatever that might mean, which makes it also legitimate. And of course, Trump said that this is our oil and we want it back. So with all of this various different justifications, none of them are very convincing. And in terms of trying to put in Machado, though, as you suggested, it doesn't seem as if the game isn't over yet. The idea that they can just kidnap Maduro and then Washington can elect the new leader, it doesn't seem to work this way. But do you see, how likely do you see the U.S. being able to essentially break the Venezuelan government now that the president has been taken?
Well, let me say a few things. First, all of the various explanations that have been given are blah, 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 meaning that they are whatever joke or improvisation the United States wants to use for the moment. The U.S. has been trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela for 23 years. They tried a coup against the predecessor of Maduro, Hugo Chavez. They have announced that the U.S. is the enemy, that Venezuela is the enemy of the United States, to put it more clearly, because this has been a left-wing regime that believes that Venezuela's resources belong to Venezuela, and that Venezuela does not have to follow the U.S. Dictates on who controls the oil and who receives the rents and so on. And so this is a long story, and it's very important to understand. In 2017, in Trump's first year of office, he said to a dinner table of Latin American leaders, "Why don't I just invade Venezuela?" Two of the leaders talked him down from that. I heard from two presidents that were there independently about this dinner. That idea of Trump of invading Venezuela is 8 years in the making. The lead cheerleader of invading Venezuela was Senator Marco Rubio, and now Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And there were celebrations in Florida today of Venezuelan expats and others celebrating the U.S. action. What does this mean? This is partly U.S. politics because Florida is a swing state, but it means it's been a long-term project. Whatever is said is just blah, blah, blah. This is a concerted, long-term attempt to bring down the government of Venezuela. I think people would do well to understand how the U.S. foreign policy operates. It operates on a long-term basis and tells whatever lies or stories or narratives it wants to tell at any given moment to keep the long-term narrative. In the case of Ukraine, it was a 30-year project to bring Ukraine into the American military orbit. This goes back to the early 1990s. In the case of Venezuela, it's been a more than 20-year effort. In the case of Syria, where Bashar al-Assad was brought down last year, that was an effort of 13 years by the CIA and the U.S. deep state. These are projects, and trying to overthrow Venezuela, which just happens to have the world's largest reserves of oil in the whole world, larger than Saudi Arabia, though more expensive to produce because it's heavy oil, but still the world's largest reserves. Well, this is a project of the United States. Trump is unusually thuggish. The collapse of the American constitutional order is very far advanced. I would say, if you think about Roman history going from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire, which is usually dated to 27 BC with Augustus becoming the princeps, I would say we're somewhere into the reign of Tiberius now. In other words, the U.S. stopped being a constitutional order 10, 20, 30 years ago. But we have the trappings of the Senate the same way that the Romans kept the trappings of the Senate. We don't have a constitutional order. We have a president enriching himself and his friends. Nobody says a word. We have a president that rules by executive decree. No one says a word. We have a president going to war against Iran or complicity in Gaza or attacking Venezuela or bombing Nigeria. Nobody says a word. We're into a post-constitutional order in the United States. So this is really our situation. It's quite dramatic. The world should not sit by if it takes any lessons from history. This is an extraordinarily dangerous period. The reason we created international law, the International Court of Justice, was not for the U.S. to sanction it and threaten it and bludgeon it. It was to avoid global annihilation in a third world war, but that one in the nuclear age. We're getting closer to that every moment when we rip up the UN Charter.
When they gave the Peace Prize to Machado, it made some sense because for the past 30 years we've been saying that peace depends on democracy, and democracy is delivered by military force. So essentially war is peace. This is kind of the logic for the past 30 years. But you see now in the media some repetition of this. That is, all the media outlets, they don't discuss the legality of what the United States has done, but they refer to Maduro as a dictator and suggesting, well, now there might be freedom. So they do what they can to make this seem legitimate. And of course, the EU frames this as standing with the Venezuelan people against their president. But as you said before, Trump has also threatened now to help the people of Iran if they are, if the protesters are, shot or arrested by their government. So, while legitimizing it might work across the Western world, the world is looking very different now. I'm not saying that countries like China or Russia would go to war with the United States. I don't think under any circumstances they're considering anything of the sort. But what are the wider ramifications here now? Because if you're sitting in Iran and other countries, you must be aware that all rule of law is now essentially gone, and it does feel the U.S. has gone rogue. Again, when we started speaking, it went through a very solid list of only the things the Trump administration has done over the past few weeks. So, what do you think are the wider ramifications beyond, of course, the sufferings in Venezuela?
Well, the first thing I would say, by the way, is that the idea that democracy is peace is a fairy tale that was disproved 2,300 years ago and countless times since then. Athens was the democracy of its day, and it was utterly imperialistic, making war, destroying other city-states. It finally ended up, in a way, committing its own suicide by an extravagant adventure to conquer Syracusa, a city-state in Sicily, which then, when it failed, left it exposed to a final defeat by Sparta in 404 BC. In the 19th century, the great democracy was Britain, certainly the most violent country of the 19th century. the country that attacked just about everybody in the world. And in the 20th century, the United States, especially in the second half of the 20th century, when the U.S. became the global hegemon, or the would-be global hegemon replacing Britain, the United States has certainly been the most violent country in the world. 100 regime change operations or so, wars of choice, perpetual war, all on whatever narrative, whatever lies, whatever story the United States wanted. And for many reasons, whether it was resources or simple conquest or ideological campaigns, but it's been war. So the idea that democracy is peace is an Orwellian idea. Democracy by these leading hegemons, whether it's Athens or Britain or the United States, has meant war almost non-stop. Now, Iran is a project like Venezuela is a project, like Syria is a project. The United States has been intervening in Iran since 1953, when it toppled the first, when it toppled a democratic government of Mossadegh, which had the audacity to think that the oil under Iranian ground was actually Iranian. And when Mossadegh declared that Iranian oil was Iranian and would be controlled by Iran, MI6 and the CIA overthrew Mossadegh and installed a police state. When the police state fell in 1979, the United States armed Iraq to attack Iran, and hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. Since that time, the United States has tried to destroy Iran in multiple ways, economic sanctions repeatedly, of course. That's why there are protests, because the economy is in a collapse, but the U.S. Is the agent of that sanctions regime. When Iran negotiated an arrangement to absolutely show that its nuclear program was curbed, Trump said no. We will crush the regime instead. This is all at the behest of the Zionist lobby in the United States and Israel in this case. So this is another project. They're probably chortling, oh, look, we're very, very close right now. We should understand that the protests in Iran are part of the script. I'm not saying people aren't protesting. I'm saying the U.S. has gone out of its way to crush the Iranian economy and to crush the regime. And last week, Trump made all of this very, very clear. So we, I think, can expect Israeli bombing soon, or maybe U.S. and Israeli bombing soon, or some other CIA operation. God only knows. But I was saying that for the world, this is alarming. It's not something just to go along with. I don't think, even though, as I said, the UN really is defunct right now, it should not be allowed to die. It needs to be brought back to life. And while the U.S. will not do that, the rest of the world, maybe the rest of the world ex-Europe, so leave aside the Western alliance, so-called, you have 85% of the world that really should not want this kind of thuggery. Of course, as an American, I don't want this kind of thuggery, but nobody asks the American people anything anymore. This is all a military state that we're in that is extra-constitutional.